And so what I hope for all of us is that our podcasts make people better. They make people feel more affirmed. They make people feel more knowledgeable. And that's the power that we use with the words that we have.
Welcome to Continuing Studies, a podcast for higher education podcasters to learn and get inspired. I'm Neil McFedrin, founder of Podium Podcast Company and Higher Ed Pods.
And I'm Jennifer Lee, founder of JPod Creations. Podcasting is broadcasting. We want you to know you're not alone. In fact, there are many of you higher ed podcasters out there, and we can all learn from each other.
That's right, Jen. And on that, we're going to try something a little bit different today. We're going to throw in each episode a question out to the audience, and hopefully we can hear from some of you. So this is how we can learn from each other. And so you can submit your questions as well. But Jen, we're going to start off with one that you and I had a conversation about with a podcast that we are helping to launch. And we had a conversation around, do you launch with one episode? Do you launch with 2 episodes? Do you launch with 3 episodes? What's the answer? What do we think?
I don't know, because there's always so many difference in opinions out there. And usually a lot of people say 3, but now it's kind of changing. So we want your feedback, because podcasting, as we're learning, is not a one size fits all.
I'm kind of in the launch with 1 and then move into your cadence. I think, Jen, you're in the camp of launch with more than 1.
Yeah, I think maybe not 3 now. And again, I think it's podcast dependent. I think launching with 2, especially if you're not going to have another episode for a little bit, like say you're going to do it bi-weekly or monthly or wherever, I think it's important to have 2 because people get more of a taste of what you're all about.
What you're saying is, if you're being introduced to this brand new podcast, having more than one, like obviously you have a trailer there, but having more than one episode out of the gates, it gives you, kind of like the Netflix. You start watching a show and it moves into the next episode and you just kind of keep watching. So that's your thought on that front, right?
Yeah, because if you get excited about podcasts, like for example, this podcast was established and I didn't find out about it till later, but I listened to the kill list and I feel like if I only listened to 1 episode, I probably wouldn't have kept listening.
There you go. Okay. Well, let's throw it out there. Both Jen and I have our email addresses in the show notes. Send us a note. We like to hear from people. If you have a question you want us to throw it to the audience, send it our way. We would love to hear from you. And your experience on this. Do you launch with 1 episode? Do you launch with 2 episodes? More than 2 episodes? What do we think? What have we seen? Love to hear.
Yeah, and feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. I've been contacted by a lot of higher education podcasters recently that I've never met, or they're just finding us. And it's nice to all be connected to each other.
Yes, do, please. That's great. Okay, so Jen, today we've got a great episode. We are interviewing Dr. Aisha Alumni, and she is the Executive Associate Vice Provost of Student Success and Belonging at the University of Illinois, Chicago, which is where we hosted the PodCon number 1, right, Jen?
Yeah, and she did the intro. And we're very grateful for her and everyone at the institution for allowing us to be there.
That's right. Now, Aisha is also the host of, and this is what we get into a bunch in this episode, of the Black Excellence podcast, which features the powerful and inspiring stories of University of Illinois, Chicago, Black students, faculty, staff, alumni, and friends. So I won't keep going. We'll just save it all for the interview. Why don't we just jump into it?
Let's jump in.
Welcome, Aisha. It's great to have you joining us here on this episode of the Continuing Studies podcast.
Well, thank you, Neil and Jen and Catherine, for having me. I certainly appreciate being in community with you all and having some conversations.
Yeah, we met you at a higher ed PodCon, and you are, as we introduced you off the top, Vice Provost at the University of Illinois, Chicago, where you hosted the PodCon, and you gave just a wonderful opening remarks to the audience. And I know that was really well received. So thank you for that. And thank you for hosting what is the first of, we thought, quite a successful event. And it was lovely having you attend as well, too.
No, I absolutely agree. It was great to be in a space with so many higher ed podcasters, right? You kind of feel like when you're talking into the microphone that you're talking into a void, you don't know how it's being received. And it's not like, live and you've got an audience and you can see reactions. And so to be in community with other folks doing that is really good. And I'm the executive associate vice provost. I'm of student success and belonging at UIC. I've had such a great, I think I've been here 21 years in different
Wow,
roles.
congrats.
Yeah.
So I got my PhD here and I kind of never left. That's the story, right? It's like, okay, why leave a good space, right? So.
Well, maybe that's a good jumping off point. Like maybe you could just sort of explain for us your role, because I think it's interesting how your podcast, which we're going to get into, plays into that role.
Absolutely. So my role really does oversee the student success enterprise at UIC. And that includes 7 different units. We have the CHANCE program. We have Latino American Recruitment and Educational Services program, Native American Support Program, our Asian American Student Academic Program, our African American Academic Network, our Academic Center for Excellence, and our TRIO program. And all of these spaces are spaces where students can go and get the supports that they need and have those barriers removed. And so we have about 36,000 students. And so we want to make sure that each of those students have a space where they can go to talk to an advisor, to get coaching, to find out where there's mental health resources available, to ask a question around housing insecurity or food needs. So these are spaces that do that, also offer tutoring, academic support, high impact practices. And so that is part of the work that I do. The funny part of this story is I started the podcast when I was Associate Vice Chancellor for Diversity and Belonging in the Office of Diversity. I started it because what I heard from students, and the podcast is UIC's Black Excellence Podcast. I started it because what I heard from students was that they really needed to see and hear more of how it looked to be a Black student at UIC and to succeed. And one thing that kind of pushed me to do it was a student was graduating and said, it's really funny. I had this series that I started where I was highlighting faculty members and their scholarship and giving out free books to their works to students, right? So that they can kind of have some interdisciplinary understandings of different spaces. And a student came up to me after and said, it's funny, I didn't know we had Black professors at UIC.
Oh, wow.
And I said, what? Like, where have you been? Like, they're all over, right? And so what I realized is that there could actually be a student that went through and did not get that connection. And so that's what made me start the Black Excellence Podcast. And of course, I get the best ideas at the very last minute. And so it was December of 2021 when I had this idea. And I said, we're doing it for Black History Month. We're doing it every day, 28 days. I'm going to have somebody else highlight it. And so we did it. It was a huge success and we continued it. We did it for the next year as monthly. And then we went to quarterly one year with all of the things that were going on. And between that time, I switched into this role. And this was an inaugural role. So it was not before. So there was a lot of work to do. And now we're back to monthly. We have won awards for it. And it really, it's really just them giving advice, them telling about their career paths, them also saying, I had a child when I was in school, and this is how I navigated that. I did have housing insecurity, and this is how that made me go into social work. And so hearing those stories and knowing that, all the paths are not straight, but they can lead to great things. So that's a little intro into what started me.
Yeah. And they're very honest here. Like I was recently listening to the Ashley Blackwell one, and my mom was doing her education while I was in the womb. And then she's like, I'm now doing my master's while having children. And she also admitted too that at one point she dropped a program and she didn't want to tell the person that was like, you need to do this program. And she's like, I was too scared to be, I'm actually out of it. And she said it was great. He was all of a sudden like, oh, that's fine. Let's pivot. And I was like, that's so relatable to everybody. Because I think a lot of times we're like someone that believes in us so much. And then we don't want to tell them that we think we failed. they're like, no, let's help you. Let's go for another one. So I thought it was great. So I could see why it spawned after 28 days. Maybe you guys could have kept going every day after.
Wow.
Oh no, we could not have. I was already insane. I was like, what did I do?
28 days is a commitment.
It is. You know, because when I came up with it, then I talked to my partner in strategic marketing. I'm like, okay, we got to partner on this. And so we just kind of got together. Alumni, give us some good folks. In no way was it me alone doing it. It was so many different partners. And I know the work that you all do, none of this can be done without partnerships, right? And the collective understanding of, okay, this is your part, this is your section. If you could do this. I even have my husband who does podcasts as well, because we had no one that did podcasts at the university. So I was like, I need an intro. I need an editor. So he's like, okay, pro bono, I got you. Now we have a whole podcast team. We have several podcasts that have launched recently as a university. So it was really kind of on the cutting edge of that space for our university.
So when you say podcast team, are there different roles that people have within the university that are actual like positions, or is this also like side things in addition to other jobs that they're doing?
This is a great question, Ian, because for me, it's an addition, right? And it's additive and I think it's affirming. I think it's, it does a lot of things. But my partner, Grace, and strategic marketing and communications, this is what she focuses on. This is her job. And so I just saw one. This is UIC is a new podcast that has come out, and they announced another. So she is building on those and also seeing where are the other spaces across the university that people are already doing this on their own so that they can get the supports, in doing so. Because when she started editing and she's giving me people to interview, I'm like, oh, this is how it should be done.
That's great. Your story where you started it and then you reached out to your husband is not dissimilar to other stories we've heard from 3-4 years ago, which is what you're talking about, where there was less of a push on a lot of campuses with podcasting. We're seeing that changing now. I think Fast Talk Smart with Matt Abrahams, which he's 5 years in now. When he first started that, he had both of his sons helping him edit that back then. And then the communications department at the Graduate School of Business at Stanford helped him out. So I think that's a regular path where you sort of reach for other resources. So that's great. But partnering with the marketing and communications department makes a lot of sense. They've got the skill sets and they can help someone in a role such as yourselves. Because I would imagine there isn't someone in your direct department who would be able to help you do this normally, right? So
no. And I think because you all did so much work in getting folks together for the conference, you really intimately understand what it is, the kind of the history. You're making me think as you talk that there needs to be kind of a history article to mark the time, right? Because when you are trailblazing and when you're amongst the first, you have to cobble together some things, right? You have to figure out, okay, my son and my husband over here, we get this person, right? And 10 years from now, people won't know that it didn't look the same. It's kind of like with my daughters, they're like, what do you mean you had to be on the phone with a cord and stay in the room? Like, what are you talking about? So that will be the world of podcasts. They're like, what do you mean you were at a whole university and there wasn't like a team of folks who did this work and editing and everything, right? And so I think it's a good piece of history there.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing is because podcasting is still so young, and because I come from a traditional background in radio and stuff, which has been around for so long, it's interesting because even now with Neil and I have businesses where we help different podcasts and universities are part of that. There's not really people that have a background in podcasting yet. You're starting to find one or two of those people that have been in it for 6 years. But like soon it's going to be like a normal career where people are like, oh yeah, I've worked on a podcast for like 6-8 years. So it will be really neat. And like a lot of students who are in communications or broadcasting, they'll probably start lending their talents to podcasts.
Yeah, it's really funny. I have a friend, I'll shout her out to Nia Harris, who just opened a bookstore, Beyond the Literature, in Homewood, Illinois. And she put a podcast studio in the back of the store. And when I say she's got it laid out, she just did a grand opening this past weekend. Like, the best top of the line microphones, the cameras, the setting with the fireplace and like all of the things. So I think in line with what we're talking about, the world is shifting, leaning in towards that, right? Where we see radio is different now because, when I was growing up with radio, you had to turn it on and listen to it. Now it's like, I'll listen to iHeartRadio. I'll listen to, like it's all of these spaces. And so we have to use the spaces that we have to pivot and respond in ways that make sense to our current times. And so bookstores having podcast studios or, like all of the things, newspapers have podcasts now, right? I just listened to NPR this morning and they were saying how audio podcasts is shifting to video podcasts. And part of that shift, Netflix is teaming up with Spotify.
Yeah, they have podcasts on Netflix. Disney Plus has podcasts already on it too. It's like rewatching the podcast with the celebs of those TV series. There's so many different avenues, which is really neat to see. And so, but now you have a new podcast space to go in. Do you think that maybe you'll be using your friend's podcast space for video podcasts in the future?
Well, it's opened up a lot of thought for me. I'm like, okay, this might look different. This might be really cool to try something different. And I think that's also when I do hear and meet different podcasters, I think there's something that's pretty amazing about them, generally, right? To be able to get on and talk to folks, have dialogue that will bring the level of awareness, the level of knowledge, the inspiration, all the things that these spaces do, I think it's pretty amazing, right? And I get some people who I want on the podcast, like, yeah, I'll really do that. I'm like, do what? Talk? Like, it's not a thing.
So you sit in the administration office. I'm speaking metaphorically there.
Yeah.
But, we've chatted with a lot of, Jen and I have been doing this for a little over 2 years now. So we're up into our 60th episode. So we've chatted a lot with different higher education podcasters. We haven't chatted with a lot of folks like yourself who sit in that administration office, which I think is really interesting opportunity. Maybe you could speak a little bit to that, of other administrators out there that are sort of thinking about using the podcast channel as part of, the voice from your office, if you will. I just think it's such a powerful opportunity for folks such as yourself.
I agree with you. And this is something that I have thought about. I have, and most folks that are in administrative roles, leadership roles, they have open office hours or open door policies because they want to make sure that folks have an opportunity to talk to them and hear from them. What I have found is that people don't very often take advantage of that. And so I think there's a space for administrators to talk and inspire and inform in a way that someone may not click on that email. Right. And so even a weekly teen podcast, right? I got 63 members of my team, right? Like if I wanted to tell them all something, could I do a segment on, okay, here's what's going on in higher ed. Here's how it's impacting us. Here are the things that, some inspirational quotes. Like, what does that look like? As opposed to here's an email or let me at our all staff meeting say these things, right? And so the ability for people to pop into a podcast when it's convenient for them, when they can listen, I think there's something pretty special about that. And it meets people where they are. And especially in a space where we talk about meeting students where they are. How do we as leaders and administrators meet our teams where they are, meet our students where they are? When oftentimes we are multiple levels away from touch points with the daily lives of those students, right? So I think there's a lot of utility in podcasting for administrators as well.
Yeah, I've got 2 sons that are in university, and one of them just started in first year. And he's taking calculus as a prerequisite to a program he wants to get into. And he didn't get a very good mark on his first calculus exam. And so I'm encouraging him to go see his professor about it. And he's like, well, what do I talk about? Just talk about what you just told me. I tried to study and this is what it is. Like, what am I doing wrong? At the very least, you're going to get FaceTime with your professor. You're in a room of multiple hundreds of people. He's going to recognize you and you'll have a bit of a connection point there. But as an administrator, you're that many more rungs removed. And I think your point about meeting them where the students are, it also speaks to the fact that the written word is less and less read. And I think that we've got this younger generation now that is more used to alternate forms of media. And I think this is the challenge of academia, that academia is based on this. I went to a talk at a symposium at NYU a couple of weeks ago about this, but just basically about the currency of academia is really the written word. It's publish or perish. Not only is there a level here of, as an administrator, how can you connect more with the students and have more sort of connection points, but there's also, I think, a challenge we have in academia that there's so much of a focus on the written word, but there's less uptake on that written word.
Yeah, and don't add AI into it.
Oh, right, yeah.
So what is the written word, right? And whose word is it? I think that's a whole other layer and challenge and complexity and dynamic that as spaces that do have such a huge value placed on the written word, how do we adjust to that shift? My nephew, he's in Delaware at school, and he said, first he started hating this professor because no computers, no phones allowed in his classroom. But you need to bring a notebook and a pen. And all papers are due handwritten. Lots of time in class to write your paper. But he said, I want you to think. I want you to write. I don't want you to depend on anyone else. I don't want nobody else spell checking you. I don't want nobody else giving you thoughts. I want you to be able to do the work. And he hated it at first, but now he's at the point where this is the best class I've ever taken. It has stretched me in a way that I didn't know I had, right? Because there's muscles that if we don't use, we lose them. So handwriting used to actually be a class, right? And writing things down and what that process and that thought looks like, as opposed to asking ChatGPT to give you a summary of something.
Yeah. I just feel like written word and communication skills is something lacking so much. And it's something that we need to change. And university and podcasting is great because more people want to do it. It is kind of strengthening that communication skills. And they're saying podcasting is helping with this, that a lot of students don't know how to communicate with their teachers, and that's affecting when they're going for a job and they can't communicate with their manager and anything like that. So I think it's very important.
No, I was telling my daughters, I have 3 daughters, all in their 20s, all in school at different levels of schooling. And I'm like, where are you going? Oh, so-and-so's out. I'm about to, we're about to go here. And I'm like, I remember when the person had to get out of the car, come to the doorbell, ring the doorbell. They would usually speak to everyone. And then, but now, I think technology, and it helps us not have to communicate. So again, with that muscle, if you don't use it, how do you know how to do it? We know that, practicing something and doing something allows us to perfect it. And we're in a time of loneliness. In the time that we're most connected, the level of loneliness is the highest it's been. And so that tells you something. Like, we need to find points of connections in varying ways. What do they say? If you want to hide something, put it in a book. Unfortunately, that is ringing more and more true today. And so how do we get the same information to the folks that we know would benefit from it? And so podcasting is definitely one of those spaces.
Yeah. And everyone that you have on your podcast is such a great communicator and a natural communicator. Like, it's such a relaxed environment, like I said, authentic. So I think more of us have to learn how to do that and to show our stories, because that will help us communicate in the future too. And realize that we are all human.
What's interesting too, and I tell all podcaster, participants this in the beginning, I say, it's a conversation with me. And I want you to share anything that you feel comfortable with sharing, but knowing that your story will resonate with someone and will allow them to continue their educational journey in ways that maybe they didn't think were possible. And so if you bring your full authentic self, that possibility is drastically increased. What I found initially is that people, when I would push the record button, there would be a different posturing. And then I would stop the recording. They'd be a lot more relaxed. And, Grace, who edits for me now and is phenomenal in our strategic marketing communications, she said, I want to change this a bit. When they come in, have the recording on. When they leave, have the recording on. And so don't have it, okay, ready, set, go. Instead, it's just the flow all throughout. And I think that also help people just to feel like I'm talking and not to feel like I'm performing. So I think that tweak for me did help my participants feel a little bit like, okay, I can be a little bit more relaxed.
I think that's a really great tip. Back to the video thing. This is where I think that video isn't always the solution either, because I think just to your point about hitting that record button, there's a certain level of I'm performing now, and it's hard to have just a natural conversation. I think video complicates that even more, that I'm going to now be self-conscious about how I'm looking.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's true.
Yeah.
And, when you can just hop on a podcast and not have to do your makeup, it's a different kind of calm that you come with in the space and the ability to just talk, right?
Yeah, you're right. Have you found that through your podcast, beyond the great conversations and sort of the output, I guess, of the podcast itself, which is connecting with the community, you found your role of having the podcast has opened up doors as well for people with different conversations that you might not have had the opportunity to if you hadn't had the podcast?
I do. It's very interesting because I oftentimes welcome groups of students, orientation, some of our President Awards program scholars, just kind of doing the welcome. I had a student that came up to me after the welcome and said, I knew your voice. I just looked it up. I was like, what? They said, I listened to your podcast. I was like, what? And they said, yeah, I was trying to decide on where I was going to college. And my counselor sent me a link to your podcast. And I listened to them. And I was like, what? And so just that interaction and knowing, like, actually there was 2 people that listened to me, that means it's the counselor thought enough to give it to a student to help in their decision-making process. And so I think those things, you don't know the rippling effect it may or may not have. And so it's always a pleasing moment to know that you had an impact, right? I don't look at helping someone make a decision on where they will go to college as a small impact, right? That is a huge moment in transition and decision. So yeah, that was pretty cool.
That's great. Yeah, again, a lot of times when I talk to people and they're like so focused on how many lessons they're getting, and I'm like, you don't realize who you're impacting. And that's the really cool thing about podcasts. You touched a little bit upon it at the beginning because you were talking about like it's mainly alumni that are on your podcast, but how do you find the guests to be on your podcast?
Well, really good question. That first 28 days, crazy. But I also graduated from UIC. And so I started calling folks that I know that had graduated and were out there to get started. And so I'm a researcher too, right? And so part of my research for my dissertation, I use a snowball method. And the snowball method is essentially you get the people, there's a first ring of people. And so those are the folks that I knew. And then I asked them, can you refer some folks that you know as well? And so I always ask folks that I do have as participants, can you tell me anyone else who you think could be beneficial to the community and enjoying the podcast? And so they also give me folks. And I have a wonderful assistant who keeps track of all of these things and sends out invites with links and answers questions for them. And also, we will Google popular or famous Black alum from UIC and we'll reach out to them, and surprisingly they respond and they want to tell their stories. I think that's the other piece that I did not expect, that people appreciate having a space to tell their story. They appreciate being able to have an infectious space where they can inspire, they can be truth tellers. They can give advice. They can be looked at as you kind of made it, right? Like we get the diploma, we start the job, but then it's like, wow, someone has asked me to come back and talk about my journey. So I've gotten a lot of gratitude from folks, just happy that they could share their story. And so the people on both sides of the microphone need connection and inspiration and a space to be affirmed, I think. And I was just looking at the people on the receiving end and not people who were talking and in dialogue.
Yeah, what a win-win example. And I love how you put that all together of not only the listening audience that is receiving all the benefit of those stories that are being shared, but the opportunity for a proud UIC alumni to be able to tell their story. And we kind of forget that they're all out there and they would really like to have that opportunity, because even if they haven't set foot back on that campus in years and years, it's still part of their makeup. It's still part of who they are. So yeah, that's a great lesson to share with the audience too. Plus, you're like the snowball effect. That's a really good one. I'm going to use that one. That's a good way to think about it and to keep the ball rolling as far as your next guest that leads to the next one, that leads to that next relationship, and so on and so forth. It must just be also a great reason to be reaching out to some of these folks, that the institution overall would, beyond sort of a financial ask, is just another way to reach out to some of these alumni as well.
No, I think that's also a really good point, Neil. We know that we reach out to alum for money, right? Mm-hmm. So it's nice to have these different spaces, right? Yeah. Where they can be value added beyond the money that they can give, right? And so that also makes them want to give, if we're being honest. You know, they feel more of a connectivity. They have been remembered as part of that community that was memorable enough to come back and share. And so I think it's a setup and a recipe for success on all ends.
I agree.
I was going to ask if your advice for another person out there who's an administrator at university, if your advice would be to launch a podcast with 28 straight days.
If you are insane like me, absolutely, because it's exhilarating to me to do something new and go all in. One thing about me, I'm an all in kind of person. So if I focus on something, I'm like up to midnight. I'm putting all that I have in it. And so for me, that was the only way to do it. What it meant for us is that we needed to start immediately in December. So I did not take the Christmas holiday break. I did not do that. I actually did recording over that time frame because one, I needed enough time to get it out so that they can edit. Two, I didn't want to mess around with people's schedules and not being available. Most people are off during the same period of time, and we'll give you 30 minutes, right? And so I really got most of my things done before we got back for the new year. That's how I just knocked them out. And so that also gave the team enough time to advertise it, enough time to edit it, enough time to do all the things that needed to be done. So I had to be lightning speed.
Well, maybe not 28 days, but for someone thinking, hey, I'm going to start a university podcast, what would be your best piece of advice to give them?
That storytelling is one of the best ways to both inspire and to inform, and that every perspective has a matching receiver. It's like going back to my old phone analogy. Every phone had a receiver at one time. And so you couldn't hang it up without that. And so there is someone out there with a phone, and there's a lot of receivers out there that need a phone to connect into so that they can make the decisions, have the information, and feel like there's other people who understand where they are and who they are. And so if you are thinking about it, do it. It is as simple as doing it, and it doesn't have to be 28 days. It doesn't have to be every week. It is also, what is your rhythm? I think, and that can also change because life changes sometimes as well. And so it's all okay. And so, I would say just dive in and find your community. You have other higher ed podcasters out here. So reach out, with questions, lean in on the community of folks that have been learning this. I think it's a very open community, very willing to give and talk to you and, pour into you and applaud you and all the things you need to get started.
Very much so.
Loved
that's
it.
great.
That was great. And we appreciate you so much. Did you have like a secret broadcasting career that I don't know about? Because you're just so good.
I love it. I'll accept that. I did not, but my background, I used to be in the military. So I got out of high school. I was a homeless teen at a point because of abuse in my family. And I found myself at a crossroads where I was working at Blockbuster Video, and I wanted something better, and I needed a place to live. I had never left the city. It was, and so I went into the military to meet my basic needs. And I stayed in for 5 years as a military police officer. I got out, I became a teacher because I did the DARE program, Drug Abuse Resistance Education, as a police officer because I was a military police officer. And across the Department of Defense schools throughout Europe because I was stationed there for 4 years. And I decided I really want to teach. Like, that's what I really want to do. And I got out and got a master's in teaching and learning. And I taught fourth grade for a while. And then I said, someone who's making policies for this school does not teach here. Like, I got to understand policy. And so I came to UIC as a veteran for free on a VA grant. And I got my PhD in policy studies of urban education, and that is what led me to higher education.
That is so cool. I think you have the best background of anybody that enrolled. And I think it leads to why your podcast is so successful, because that's something that I learned through listening to podcasts. It's like, just because you start one way doesn't need to mean you're going to end that way.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I always share my story, right, with my students, with my staff, with my folks, because it is absolutely true. I went to a vocational high school, and I was told that I was not college material. And I believed it. And honestly, words, and this is really in alignment with podcasts, I do believe that words make people. When I went to the military, the only way I could get rank is if I went to school. And so I started going to college to get rank. And I had other words whispered to me, "You're brilliant. How did you think of that?" And those words told me I could keep going. And so what I hope for all of us is that our podcasts make people better. They make people feel more affirmed. They make people feel more knowledgeable. That's the power that we use with the words that we have.
That was like a perfect way to end it. We appreciate you being on the podcast.
What a great way to.
Yeah, I appreciate it as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed chatting with Aisha. That was great to dig in and hear all about her experience with her podcast.
And her Army career. She's just very amazing.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so just to circle back off the top, send us your questions, but also give us what you think about launching with 1 episode or 2 episodes or 3 episodes. Like, what would you recommend and what have you experienced?
Yeah, please contact us.
Well, Jen, why don't you read us out?
Thank you for tuning into the Continuing Studies podcast, a podcast for higher education podcasters. We hope you found this episode informative and inspiring. If you enjoyed the show, we encourage you to follow and subscribe to our podcast on your preferred platform so you'll never miss an episode. But if you found this episode particularly valuable, please consider sharing it with your friends and colleagues who also might be interested in higher education podcasts. We also invite you to join your peers on higheredpods.com, where you can connect with other podcasters in higher education and learn from others in the field. Thank you for being part of our community. We look forward to continuing to bring you valuable insights and conversations around higher education podcasts. See you in the next episode.